Good morning, and today we're going to talk about how to graph our polynomial functions. And you might notice the reason it says sketch/graph is this might not look exactly like what it is, but we're going to highlight all the key points, and it's going to be a pretty good representation of it. Okay? So it's kind of a sketch or a graph of our polynomial function. And before we begin, I want to point out, if you have not completed yesterday's lesson, you need to stop right now, go watch yesterday's video and do it, because today's not going to make sense if you don't. So we have our 4 steps here, and the first step here, we need to find all the zeros/x-intercepts, because those are the same thing, and decide if they touch or cross, and then we're going to plot them on this graph. So first step, we did part of that yesterday. We need to find the zeros. So once again, we can do this by setting each part equal to 0. So right here, if we have like x squared equals 0, square root will give us x equals 0. And so I'm going to go ahead and write 0. That one has a multiplicity of 2, which hopefully you remember, if it's an even multiplicity, that means it's going to touch the axis, not cross through it. Okay. Now, the second one is going to be just x minus 3 here equals 0. We add the 3 over, we get x equals 3. And that one has a multiplicity of 1, which tells us it will cross. Now, these 2 points are on our x-axis, so I'm going to go ahead on the x-axis at 0, put a dot right at the origin, and I'm going to put a little t beside that to remember it just touches there. And then I'm also going to go to 3, put a dot there, and I'm going to put a c there because it crosses. So that is all we have to do for step 1. Step 2, we need to determine the degree and the end behavior. Okay, so remember, we do this by adding up our x's. So 2, I'll do this in red, we have 2 from this one, 1 there. So 2 plus 1 gives us 3. So we have a degree of 3. And our end behavior, since it is positive, that means we know our end behavior, it starts below and ends above. All right, so next we need to find our y-intercept by plugging in 0 for x. Now, some of you might already know what the y-intercept is because we've actually already plotted it. But if you weren't sure, if we plug in a 0, 0 squared times 0 minus 3, 0 squared gives us 0, 0 minus 3 is negative 3, and 0 times negative 3 gives us 0. Okay, so this point right here is also our y-intercept. It's an x-intercept and it's a y-intercept. So now we need to sketch the graph using all the information. So we know it's coming up from the bottom. So it has to start somewhere down here. And it comes up, and at that point it touches, but it does not cross through. Okay, so at that point it curves back down, and then at this point of 3, it goes through and crosses. So, and we don't exactly know how deep this valley goes. We don't know what angle it comes up at, but this is a rough representation. It's a sketch of what's going to happen if we graph this polynomial. So let's go ahead and try our second one. And this is something that is just going to take practice. So the first thing we want to do once again is identify our zeros. Now I'm not going to write this out, but hopefully you can see that 1, 0 is 0. And that has a multiplicity of 1. So at that point it will cross. Then there's another one, a 0 of 4. That also has a multiplicity of 1. And that will also cross. So now let's go ahead and plot those 2 points. So 0 and 4. And both of those I'm going to put a C by both of them because they're both going to cross. Okay, now, the second step. Once again, we need to determine the degree in end behavior. So, our case here, it's got a degree of 2, and it is negative, which means something like that. It starts pointing down and it ends pointing down. Okay. Now the third step is finding our y-intercept by plugging in 0 for x. Here's a hint. Anytime you have an x-intercept of 0, we know that's also the y-intercept, so we can skip that step. Okay, and then the final step, sketch our graph using all of this information. So we know it comes from the bottom. Oops, I made that a little off. So it comes from somewhere down there, and it crosses at the point 0, and then it crosses again at 4 and goes back down. It makes sense if this was degree 2, that's some sort of square. If we would factor this in, distribute that in, we would get a square, which makes sense that it has to be some sort of parabola. Okay. Now, obviously, I don't know exactly where the vertex is. Mine should look symmetric, hopefully, but we don't know exactly what it looks like, but that's partly why we're calling it a sketch. Okay. So go ahead and flip to the back, and if at any point you want to try one of these on your own, go ahead, just pause the video and give it a try. And if you make a mistake, that's fine. That's why we're learning. If you need more graphs because you made a mistake, flip to the back. The very last page of your packet has, I think there's 8 graphs between the two, and if you need more, when you get back to school on Wednesday, let me know. We can get you some more. So if we look here, on the back, number 3, this -2, since there's no x with it, we don't need to worry about it yet, okay? That will be important when we decide our shape and the end behaviors, like which way it's pointing, but we don't need that, okay? So that will not really be important until we try to determine the degree in end behavior, okay? So let's go ahead and skip to this second part, x plus 1. So that tells us we have -1, and it has a multiplicity of 2, which means since it's even, it will just touch. Okay, it's not going to cross through, it's going to touch. And then the final one here, x minus 3, that has a 0 of 3, and a multiplicity of 1, which means it will cross. So I'm going to go ahead and plot these. So at -1, we know it will touch, so I put a little t. And at the point 3, we know it will cross. All right. Second step, we need to determine the end behavior and the degree. So, or the degree which gives us the end behavior. So this one, we have 2 x's from that, 1 x right here, so 2 plus 1 gives us a degree of 3. It is negative if we look to the front here, it's a negative. So since it's a negative, degree 3, that's going to start high and end low. Okay, so now the third step. We need to identify what is the y-intercept. In our case here, we don't know what it is because 0 is not one of our options there. So we need to plug in. So if I plug in a 0 right here and right here, where I put those green arrows, that'll tell us. So -2, go ahead, 0 plus 1 squared, and then 0 minus 3. We multiply all that. So 0 plus 1 squared, 0 plus 1 is 1, 1 squared is just 1, so -2 times 1 times -3. -2 times 1 gives us a -2, times a -3 gives us +6. So we know it will have to come all the way up here to the 6. So now, as you can see, we look at the end behavior. It starts high, comes down here, and touches, but it doesn't go through it. It hooks back very sharply and goes up through that 6 And then at some point, we don't know exactly when, but at some point it has to hook down. And then it crosses there. So I put an arrow on both ends, and it looks something like this. Okay, we've got 2 more of these we're going to practice together. Once again, if you want to try it on your own, go ahead, pause it, see how you do. So first thing, let's find our zeros. So this first one, x squared, it's going to have a 0 of 0, multiplicity of 2, which means it will just touch. Okay, the second one is 2, multiplicity of 1, which means it will cross. And then our final one has a multiplicity of -3, which means it has a 0 of -3, a multiplicity of 1, which also means it will cross. So I'm going to go ahead and plot these at 0, 0. We know it's going to touch at, at 2. Let me put that right here. So it's going to touch. At 2, it's going to cross. And at -3, it's going to cross. Okay, so now let's determine the degree. So we have 2 from there, 1 from there, 1 from there. 2 plus 1 plus 1 gives us degree of 4. It is positive. Okay, so degree 4, that's positive. We know both ends are going to point up. So it starts from high and it ends high. So now we come in, we started from high, we cross there, and at some point it's going to loop up. Oh, I forgot to say, on this one, since 0 right here was step 3, we could skip because 0 is there. If you don't trust it, you can plug 0 in for each of these, but you are going to get a y-intercept of 0. Okay, so it comes up here now and it touches. So then it bows back down, and then it goes back up, and it's going to cross. And then I just need to throw my arrow on both sides, and there we go. Something like that. All right. One more. Let's do one more together, and then I'll let you guys get to work. So on this last one, example 5 here, we need to once again start with our zeros. So this half we don't need to worry about. The x plus 4 will be -4, has a multiplicity of 1, so that means it crosses. Okay, then x plus 2 has a multiplicity of 1 also, so -2 multiplicity 1, and that crosses. And then the final one would be 2, it's a multiplicity of 1, so it will also cross. Okay, so now our degree is 3. There's 3 x's, and it's positive. So we know start low, end high. And I forgot to plot those, so let me quick put -4. That's cross, -2. It's going to cross, and +2. It's going to cross. Okay, so now, before we can go, we need to solve for the y-intercept. So we know there's going to be 1/2. Now I'm going to simplify it a little. I'm just going to do some of this in my head. So we plug in a 0. 0 plus 4 gives us 4. 0 plus 2 gives us 2. And 0 minus 2 gives us -2. So now we multiply across. Half of 4 is 2. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times -2 gives us -8. So down here at 0, -8, it has to cross there. So once again, it starts low. It crosses at this point, hooks back and crosses at the -2. It's got to go all the way down to the -8, we know. And then it cuts back up and crosses through it too. And we put an arrow on each end, and we are done. So today was a little bit to handle. Tomorrow will be a review day. Make sure you come to class with questions, ready to go, and let me know if there's anything I can do for you. Don't forget to look at today's activity, and I hope you guys have a great day. Bye.